Will America survive? Will America be here in the end times? Will America go through a civil war? What about the vision from George Washington that America is going to face a dark time that will almost come to its self-destruction? Many people don't know that George Washington reported of such a thing, not because he thought, not because he felt it, but because he had a vision according to George Washington, and he shared that America was going to face something so hard that it never faced before, and it could be the end of her as a nation. What about other prophecies? What about William Branham, a prophet from the 20th century that God used mightily and spoke in a tremendous, powerful manner? Well, today we have a guest here in Counsel and Remedy with Pastor Samuel. His name is Stone Seguin. He has written a book titled The 10th, America's Next Constitutional Crisis. Can the United States survive? Before I bring him on, I would also like to give a shout out to Red Rose Kale, who made a comment on probably, I believe, our second video that we produced and our second message that we produce on social media. Red Rose, thank you for making that comment. And it's interesting because Red Rose made a comment on a video about a prophetic word for our nation when we hosted Charlene Ramirez, a prophet of God, who also wrote a book, God is Speaking Now. And I will be quoting from this book. And it's very interesting because she also mentioned George Washington. She also mentioned the fact that our nation needs to turn to God, or else it will be facing a perilous time. So Red Rose, thank you for making comments. Actually, you made several, and we appreciate that. And we trust that you and many others are going to hit that subscribe button, activate the notification bell, and give us those thumbs up and share this, because here is where you're going to find the real deal when it comes to the word of God, the power of God, and insight in about different subjects so that you in every aspect of your life can supernaturally walk on water. Now, with us, as I said, is Stone Seguin. Stone will be joining us today via audio only, and we thank him for that because that is the only thing that we were able to connect with him. So, Stone, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your interest. And yes, I do go by Stone Seguin. That is my pen name under which I wrote the book, just because I felt that the topic might be somewhat controversial. And so I used the name Stone Seguin.
And Mr. Stone, I do want to share at least two reviews that I've seen about your book, The 10th. And I'll quote them. Frank Managan said that your book is mind-boggling page turner. The book is frightening because events could actually happen. God forbid. I would recommend it to anyone regardless of their political views. It's an easy read, and I can't wait for volume 2. Kudos to Mr. Seguin. Thomas D. Ingle Jr. said it's frighteningly realistic. Now, the reason I mentioned, or I'm quoting Thomas D. Ingle Jr. afterwards, is because they were not given, those reviews were not given at the same time. Some of them, there has been a space of time between them. And the reason that Ingle says is frighteningly realistic is because a lot of the things in your book, I would almost say it's almost like a prophetic book, but yet you are not necessarily a minister or a prophet. I believe your background is from the military, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I spent 6 years in the United States Navy. I've always long been a history buff, a military buff, economics. My undergraduate degree is an economics degree. So that's the perspective from which I approached the book. I did write the book way back in 2012. Took me until 2014 to get it published on Amazon. So this book was written, a few years ago, and obviously we've had some time now to see the evolution or devolution of our country, as you may take it. Yeah, some folks, including myself, are thinking that it is becoming closer to possible reality.
Yes, and of course, it's a fictional book, and in no way are we this video to incite people to start a revolution against the United States. This is not what it is. But what we want to do is look at the possibilities of what we're looking in today. Now, I'll be honest with you. Most of the time that I read the book was when we were on the road, and I would allow my wife to drive while I read. Now I said I can either be frightening as I read the book, or I can be frightened as my wife drives. So I just rather read the book and then not see where she's driving and how she's driving and frightening me. But the thing is, all right. So the thing is, it's I was turning to my wife as we were driving, and it's interesting because I would tell her, "My gosh, do you realize this is actually happening already?" And I can't wait to get in there. Now, before we go on more, can you please tell us? I believe you have a blog that's available. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Uh, yes, I have a blog called www.thesurvivalistnews.com, and you do have to put it in exactly because there's lots of other blogs with very similar names, but it's thesurvivalistnews.com. And we also have a Facebook page that's affiliated with it, and Twitter. And that's the blog where I used, to put some additional ideas and writings. And on the website itself, the first either 3 or 5 chapters of the book are available on there.
Wonderful. Before we go on, Mr. Stone, if you can also raise your volume or speak up a little bit because we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. And before we start, we're about to start. I'm very excited. I also asked Miguel Ramon, who is a youth leader in a group called The Collective. He is going to also join us as well. And he will also be joining us in the Spanish message as well, because all of our messages are available, mostly all of them, with the exception of 1 or 2, are available in both English and Spanish. So if you know of relatives, of friends who speak Spanish, and you would like for them to hear this insight, please share this information with them, share our messages with them. But Miguel, can you please introduce yourself as well? Miguel has very insightful ideas as well, but as a youth leader, can you just let us know what ministry you run and where they can find you as well?
Yes, hi. Well, my name is Miguel Ramon. I am a youth leader for The Collective. We do have an Instagram page. We are 915 EP The Collective. You can find us there. We meet every Saturday, 5 p.m. And we go to coffee shops, we go to other people's houses, and we minister. We give the word, and we just relate to each other.
And their specialty is to minister to young adults, correct?
Yes, ages from 18 all the way to 28.
So please, as you can see, it's such an exciting topic. Politics should involve all ages, correct? Yes. And so if you want to be able to be blessed with the ministry of Miguel Ramon, please reach out to him and hear this message again so you can know exactly where to find him and his ministry. And not only is his specialty in that area for young adults, his specialty is also for coffee. So get some insight from him in regards to coffee. So here we go. This topic is going to be intense. Please stay with us till the very end. We have some topics in regards to the Word of God, politics, the military, current events, prophecy, visions. We're going to look at it all. So I need you to be with me to the very end so that we can together also make time to intercede for our country. Mr. Stone, please tell us what led you to write the book, The 10th. Why did you write this book?
Yes, and please let me know if this is better on my audio side of it.
Just a little bit higher. Yeah, if you can get a little bit louder, that'd be good. But tell us what led you to write this book?
So the first big step happened in 2008 after the financial crisis. As I mentioned, I have an economics degree, and I've long been a history buff, constitution buff. And when I heard one of our presidents, a Republican president no less, go on television and say, in order to save our free market system, we have to destroy the free market system.
Wow.
And that just sent chills on my spine, not in a good way. And I realized that at that point, they were no longer, they being the federal government, was no longer trying to even hide that they've completely departed from the Constitution, in my opinion. That continued over the next several years, just seeing more and more departures from the Constitution, and I can get into that if you'd like. But for brevity, um, fast forward to 2012, and by 2012, I saw that several of the states were doing things that were even more egregious against the Constitution, specifically like California, New York, Connecticut. Some of this had to do with gun control, overturning. The people would go out and vote against abortion, and the courts would just overturn it. This would throw out the will of the people. And so I started becoming aware that I wanted nothing to do as a Texan, as an American. I wanted nothing to do with some of these states that, because of their size, California and New York in particular, had a large influence. And so I started having an uneasiness that even though I had been a veteran, I no longer felt comfortable with some of the states that were part of our union. And also seeing the rhetoric that they would use against the quote unquote red states. We're Hicks, we're bitter clingers, we bitterly cling to our guns and our Bible, our religion. And so I started seeing a division coming where they didn't understand us and we don't understand them, thinking that there was a difficulty for common ground. And in short, I just started having, I hate to say visions, but almost thoughts of what a disruption, a breakup, and a civil war might look like. Scenes in my head that might be a book. I had not done any creative writing since college, but these scenes just kept coming in my head when I was asleep or when I was in the shower or doing whatever. And I finally decided that I had to just write the book just to get it out of my system.
Mhm.
People that are artists say my art must come out or my music must come out, and I finally understood what that meant.
Wow. If I may add, one of the criticisms about your book in your reviews is what is taking so long for the sequel. They're like, what is taking so long? Why is it not out here? Is that even in the making, or should just people resort to just looking at this volume and this is what it is, and that's all they're going to get?
I'm on chapter 25 of the second book. The first book, as you know, is 31 chapters. My thought is the second book is probably going to be a little bit longer than the first book. But to answer the real question, because writing is hard at times, as you all know, George R.R. Martin has been taking forever to write his next piece of Game of Thrones. So I guess that's my poor excuse. Writing can be very difficult at times. The first book came out very quickly. I wrote the entire first book in less than a year, believe it or not. And yes, now it's been several years that I've been not able to get the second book finished. Life changes, family changes, work changes, everything changes. That's not a good excuse, but it's the best I've got.
Well, the good thing is that it is a book that when people get it, they want to find out what else is coming. And we'll get to it as to why people want to find out what's up next. Miguel, can you tell us, in regards a little bit about what Stone shared in regards to his uneasiness with what the states are doing? Do you see anything that resembles some of the early fathers of the Constitution, maybe the philosophers that influenced the Revolutionary War? What do you think? I know that we've talked a little bit, just very briefly about it, or we mentioned it. Can you share with our audience some insight in regards to what Stone's book is about? And are we really facing a possible crisis again because of the Constitution and the philosophy or the faith that drove the early framers of the Constitution?
Right. So right off the bat, John Locke was very, very noticeable. He's the person the philosopher that inspired Jefferson to write Life, Liberty, and Pursuit of Property. He really wrote Pursuit of Property, but Jefferson put happiness. But in respect to that, a lot of us feel like the government isn't a legitimate government anymore, because the purpose of a legitimate government is to take care of those natural rights that we're born with. So once the government stops doing that, you have a lot of revolutions, you have a lot of militias going against the government, and that's what we see in the book. So it's very noticeable. We also have Jean-Jacques, which talks about the separation of powers. So we have the judicial branch, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and he's the one that called for three of those to be separated. And in the book, we have some type of play with that in terms of the governors and a lot of the amendments going into it.
Mm-hmm. And what's most interesting about that is that we have gone through, I think, several decades of no idea of what it means to really challenge the government.
Right.
You have read the book from Stone, correct?
Yes.
Do you feel that maybe in one way or the other, America has kind of become dulled with that sense of holding the government accountable? Because most people, when they hear something like this, is like you're calling up people for arms like now and join a militia and overthrow the government. That is when people disengage and they say, that's not me. I don't want to do this. So reading and being that you're not from a background of a military background, but you're a person of faith, you know about the framers of the Constitution. And Stone, if you can please jump in as well. As you read this book, what resonated with you? I mean, you can tell already he's got passion because he's already pounding the table, right? But well, not hard, but he's getting on it. You need to get the book, by the way, because I can tell you it will stir your heart up, in regards to your emotions, and you can see it coming out already. But what do you think? What do you make in regards? Did America become so dulled to either two of extremes? Is that's not me. I don't want to pick up a gun and fight the government. I'm going to lose. Or let's overthrow the government. Let's blow it all up. And again, Stone, please come in when you can.
Right. So, I mean, right after the, I don't know if it was a January event, so January 6th, it became very apparent that that's how we feel. Personally, I also feel that way. I feel like, and John Locke stated it, once a government becomes illegitimate, we the people, since we have the power, we're able to, oh man, I don't know. I want to say overthrow them, right? And it's,
well, you're quoting him. You're
right,
not necessarily advocating.
I'm quoting John Locke. John Locke says, once the government becomes illegitimate, we the people, since we have the power, since we have those natural rights, we're able to do that because they're not protecting us, our natural rights at least. Mm-hmm. So yes, and again, going back to recent events, January 6th was such a big example of that, how we became this nation of, we don't want to deal with this anymore, we want what we want back, and we're going to get it.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, so because most people think that in regards to people of faith, we shouldn't be involved in politics at all. We should just be focused on our church, our faith, of winning the world for Jesus Christ. And I agree. As a minister, I agree. But I want to quote you, Charles Finney. And Charles Finney did say the following: God cannot sustain this free and blessed country, which we love and pray for, unless the church will take right ground. Politics are a part of a religion in such a country as this, and Christians must do their duty to their country as part of their duty to God. Charles Finney. Charles Finney was a famous, popular, not just because he was popular on media or the newspaper, but he was popular because God's hand moved strong on him, and miracles would leave people silent and in awe that they couldn't believe what was accompanying this man. I mean, this guy would empty out jails when he would go into villages and cities because people would have such a strong conviction. People were under the power of God for days, sometimes even over a week when he would minister. So this is not a person that we should take lightly. Yes, we are to be building the kingdom of God. However, that does not mean that we're excused to not be involved and be salt and light in the government. Stone, Rome went through a split in their empire, and by the time that it did, Christians were in there already. So, what would you advise, Stone, to the Christian, the person of faith that's hearing this message, or is thinking, I don't have to read this book, but yet I tell people this is not prophecy, but it's almost prophetic because a lot of what's in the book came to be. What would you say to Americans if they are to face a civil war in their country? Is this a good book to read? What's the purpose? What can they get out of this book in regards to that sense of idea?
Well, the first thing that I would say is addressing your first point about whether some Christians question involvement in politics or even taking up arms. During the revolution, maybe many people may not know this, there was a thing called the Black Robe Regiment. And what that was that in many of the church houses, which also doubled as the schoolhouses, by the way. In
Yes.
many of these church houses, it was the ministers that began speaking out against the tyranny of the British Empire. And then later, after the flame of revolution had been sparked, many of these ministers actually left the pulpit and joined and actively fought in the revolution. Anybody who doubts that can look it up. The Black Robe Regiment. That was a term that was used for all these ministers that led first from the pulpit to resist, and then later took up arms. And your point about Rome is also excellent. You know, we cannot escape politics. There's no way. There's think tanks out there that do research and have shown that there's so many millions of Christians in this country that don't vote, that if those Christians voted, we could certainly have things like more conservative ideals. Maybe we wouldn't have lost prayer in the school. Certainly we could have overturned or stopped Roe versus Wade, which most Christians, I think, would say, you know, abortion is very wrong according to the Bible. So yes, on the one hand, you could say that you're staying out of politics, but I don't think that the Bible supports that. You know, Paul himself went and spoke to governors and procurators and Nero himself, right? And yes, granted, you could say, well, he was trying to win them for Christ. Yes, of course. But he could have easily spoken to others and not to the government officials. So I would say, yes, people need to be involved, number one. Number two, the purpose of the book, and by the way, a retired two-star Army general read the book and was also very concerned about it. And he asked me the purpose of the book, as you just did. And I told him that the purpose of the book was as a warning on a number of levels. Number one, because people think it can't happen here. And number two, and I haven't quite gotten this because this would be more in the second book, just how ugly, just how hideous a second revolution would be. Not to get too far into the military, but military technology has advanced to the point that if it comes about, it's going to be far worse than the first Civil War, far worse than the second Civil War. Most military theoreticians themselves don't even know and admit that whatever's coming next is going to be really, really awful. We're just starting to see the beginnings with drone warfare and AI and cyber. And so it's a warning. So yes, I would advise people to read and prepare for whatever may come. The parable of the virgins that went and got the oil. Be ready to pray always, but be ready for we don't know what's coming.
And you know the thing is that God has a special protection upon his elect, but there comes a time where the elect need to make a decision and either leave or learn how to survive. And the story that comes to mind is Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. If you remember, he actually chose to be in Sodom and Gomorrah, which was wicked, and there was violence everywhere. And the Bible specifically says that in the end times, the days will become like Sodom and Gomorrah, which, by the way, is already a different message that I have ready to share in regards to what I'm sensing in the spirit is a demonic influence on making people extremely volatile and violent. And it's interesting because it's going on in places where already, like you had said, of people making fun of other states where they uphold gun rights, they uphold the Second Amendment, but yet it is in some of these places where they're very anti-Second Amendment, but violence is through the roof. And I can't stop to think about the different viral videos that are out there of people just attacking people for no reason at all. People going up to a certain ethnic race, like the Asians, and women on a bus, and having their hair being turned on by a certain a group or a certain ethnic group. I've seen people just for no reason at all start fights and start punching people up for the appearance of being disrespected, and yet it's okay, because if you retaliate, it's going to be seen as racism. Now, the thing is, we can be as Christians and think it's never going to happen to us. It's never going to be something that comes home to us. But like Lot, there comes a point where those violent people were banging on those doors and they were saying, give us whoever is in your home. And I think as Christians, we got to be ready. What do you suggest, Stone, for people of faith? We're always thinking about peace, though. How can you reconcile maybe taking action with the peaceful, for Christ's call for us to be children of God, because we're known for being peacemakers? Can you give us some insight there?
Well, I think you hit on the most relevant ones. Absolutely, we are called to try to walk in faith and walk in peace, but there comes a time when we must defend ourselves, when we must defend our families, right? I believe it was Nehemiah that was building the walls of Jerusalem, but they were holding in one hand the sword while they worked with the other hand, because that was the reality of they were being attacked, and those attacks were hampering the work of God. And of course, our Lord Jesus himself said, if you do not have a sword, sell your cloak and buy a sword. Why? Because he understood that he was sending his followers out on very dangerous missions as well. So I think people need to do whatever they feel comfortable with. I will tell you this, just since COVID and the disturbances in the summer, the protests, the riots, whatever you want to call them, I've had 3 longtime friends, all of them believers, who had always told me, I don't want a gun, because I'll be honest, I always tell people, if you love your family, you need to have a firearm. I don't know how you claim to love your family and don't have the means to defend them. In love, I didn't say it offensively. Obviously, these people are still my friends. But just since that happened, all 3 of these men came to me and said, "Okay, Ernesto, I need to buy I need to buy a firearm. What should you suggest?" And then that's a whole different conversation. So I think more and more people are starting to wake up to the reality that the world is changing. The government at times doesn't want to protect us, which, by the way, gets back to the social contract theory that Miguel was alluding to, right? When you live in somewhere like Portland and the mayor and the governor literally tell the police, stand down, don't go out there, don't protect people's lives and property, and we see that in Minneapolis, we see that in city after city. They're defunding the police. I mean, those are facts. That's just the reality. So are we to say we're not going to take any steps? Now, not everybody still may be comfortable with a firearm. There are things you can do that are very effective short of a firearm. People know about pepper spray, but did you know that if you go and you get bear spray, you're not going to carry that around in your purse or in your pocket, but bear spray can shoot 20 or 30 feet. It's like pepper spray mace on steroids. So if you don't feel comfortable with a firearm,
Yeah.
get a big can of bear spray and keep that in your house.
That's good. That's a good point.
You can buy a pepper balls, which are again pepper gas that you can shoot out of a paintball marker. Again, that's not the same thing as a firearm, but you start shooting somebody. First of all, it hurts. If anybody's been shot with a paintball gun, that hurts. But these pepper balls now explode, and now you have a cloud of pepper spray. There's all kinds of things that you can do, stun guns, things like that, big cattle prods, again, for your home. But evaluate what you feel comfortable with. Get some dogs. I have dogs in my front yard and my backyard. I sleep well at night because I know nobody's gonna come in and mess with my big dog typically. So yes, all Christians, all people should take whatever steps they feel comfortable with to prepare. And the first rule of preparedness is making sure that you're safe, safety and security.
It's interesting you're talking about the dogs protecting you. Most Americans now are pampering the dogs, and the dogs are probably in bed with them. So it's
and,
probably
and the dogs weigh 10 pounds. My
yeah.
smallest dog weighs 65 pounds. My
Yeah.
biggest dog weighs 95 pounds. I don't have little toy dogs. I have mean looking dogs.
Well, I'm looking for a dachshund. If anyone has a weenie dog to spare, puppy, my wife will not accept them older, but you call us and you let us know. Now, Miguel, if you can add a little bit, what did you think about when we got to the point of there's two things in the book that really alarmed me because as we were going through the pandemic, the restrictions and everything, it seems that every law-abiding citizen was all of a sudden silenced and scared, and you better be at home and you better not get out.
Right.
But yet, like you see in the book, there's two things that stood in the book as the pandemic was hitting. Shortages of food and everything, shortages of everything, but at the same time, riots. What was running through your mind in regards to, I guess, the fundamentals of America, faith, and the book? What ran through your mind as you were reading that book?
I had to stop. I had to stop reading it, and I
Me too.
I literally ran outside, and I kind of looked at the streets, and I was like, wow. Went back inside, read it again, did the same thing. I went back outside, and I was like, I can't believe this.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we're here. But yeah, it was very interesting
Yeah.
how it started with the food shortages, and then all of a sudden there's riots everywhere, and that's how the world became. That was a new norm, which is what we were going through, which is pretty frightening.
Very frightening. And again, that's why I mean, I only quoted 2 reviews. There's so many reviews out there in regards to the book. You really got to get a hold of it. But it's Stone. Going through the actual pandemic and reading your book was probably not good timing.
Yeah. As an understatement. Actually.
Yeah, and actually I did stop reading your book too because I was like, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming.
Well, let me.
So, I mean, and I hope you take this as a good compliment, Stone, because the thing is that that those things happen. But I go back to this, Miguel and Mr. Stone, is America seems to have gone very dull.
Right.
Very dull that we should not question anything or even challenge it at all. Where we seen people like mothers, I mean, we're talking about homemaking moms taking their kids to the park and getting arrested because they were out in the park, even wearing the whole mask and the face shield and the whole astronaut hazmat suit or something, but they still got arrested. But yet seeing people looting and destroying property and burning up cities, Stone, cities were pulverized and destroyed to the point that even law enforcement was not able to have control of those cities. All that is in the book and more. I mean, of course, the book gives a little bit of a different twist. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to, in regards to a revolution, food shortages, and the riots?
Yes, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, back in 2008, after the financial crisis, is when I really became concerned about the sustainability of our country, and I became a prepper. That's why my website is The Survivalist News. Even though I had been military, I had never really been a prepper to that point. And when I started studying it, I found a bunch of things that are very alarming. And I would encourage, one of the commentators I love is Glenn Beck. Some people love him, some people hate him. But I will say this: Glenn Beck always encourages his listeners, saying, "Go, don't believe me. Go do your own research." And I believe that. So I say the same thing now. Don't necessarily believe me. Go do your own research. What I discovered when I started looking at this is that our supply system is on a razor's edge. The average American supermarket, whether it's Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, has 3 days worth of food. 3 days worth of food.
Even
Once
Food
the-
King?
Yes.
Food
Once-
King probably has like 1 day. Of food.
once the trucks stop running. So think about this. Anything that disrupts the trucks, right? The trains as well, but the trucks can immediately lead to a food shortage. And that's 3 days worth of food at normal consumption rates. That's not panic buying. Now, back again, the 2008 financial crisis, most people don't really remember this, but there were some food shortages then because the credit was freezing up. If you're a trucker and you need to fill up your truck with $300 worth of gas, you don't typically pull that out in cash. You put that on a credit card, whether it's your personal or a business credit card. Then you do your run. Then they pay you. Then you pay at the end of the month. You pay your credit card, right, or your gasoline account. That's the way it works. So the credit was freezing up, and so 10%, between 8 and 10% of the truck routes at the time stopped running, just from that. So a larger disruption, it could be, we saw the pandemic, but it could be an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse attack. It could be a very serious cyber attack, like the one that shut down the oil gas pipeline on the East Coast. Anything like that can shut down the trucks. Or so think about a 50% reduction in the trucks running. Half the country goes without food in 3 days or less.
Wow.
3 days or less. That's not prophetic. That's just do your homework. And obviously, once people start running out of food, there's going to be riots in the streets, even without the Black Lives Matter, the hey, we killed an innocent black people, all those the political protests. That's just when people start running out of food. Also, and I forget the year, but there was a couple of years ago, there was a disruption to the food stamps, the EBT. And there was riots in several cities because the EBT benefits were supposed to be dispersed on a certain day, and something happened with the computers, and it took them 2 or 3 days later, and people were starting to riot as well. And that wasn't as widely covered. So our society is on a razor's edge. And all that this pandemic has done is show it to us how thin, how narrow that margin of safety actually is. And by the way, the cyber attack that we had, remember people on the East Coast not having gasoline, and then we had the freeze, right? People without power because of the freeze.
Correct.
Any and all of these things can happen. Imagine if the truck stopped running in the winter.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, our society is not what it used to be. During the Great Depression, for instance, more than half of Americans lived on farms, or at least in an area where they could grow their own food. You know what percentage that is today? Less than 10%.
Wow.
So our society is fundamentally changed. Even an economic downturn is going to affect our food.
So being that, how does that contribute to what you would say civil unrest or the breaking of a society in America? And put it together, like for instance, whether it's freedom of speech, access to media platforms, the spread of poverty, unemployment, a civil arrest, lack of, or limited resources, food. Do you see that this is going to be something that is going to be manipulated by someone to make this happen? Or do you think it's just a natural occurrence that it leads that way and we end up in a civil war?
I believe it's a natural occurrence for the most part, but I do believe that there's actors that are pushing their agenda to make it worse. Certainly the media only tells one side of the story, their agenda. Social media, which is in lockstep with the mainstream media, and one half of the government, everybody knows what that is. So that they're making a lot of these natural problems, if you will, worse, in my opinion, because they have an agenda. And the thing that all this has come about is it's further highlighted the divide. You now have, it used to be Democrats and Republicans, or fiscal conservatives and fiscal liberals, or people that were pro-gun and anti-gun. Well, guess what? Now you have vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, right? Mm-hmm. You have one set of people that say, no, the government is just trying to control us. And by the way, you also have one part of the people saying, I no longer believe what the government's been telling us. The government has changed their story so many times. follow the science, follow the science. Well, science doesn't change week to week, but yet we're constantly told, follow the science, follow the science. But if you go back and look at what, certain parts of the government, like the CDC, were telling us at the beginning, and what they're telling us now, it doesn't make it doesn't hold up. But yet you still have another part of the people saying, oh yes, I believe it. I believe everything the government tells us, and I'm following it. And those of you that don't believe it are just against, everybody getting back to normal. Same thing with the riots, right? The CNN famously had a reporter standing in front of a burning building saying these are mostly peaceful protests.
I remember that.
And again, you have half the country that believe them, and the other half say, turn around and look behind you.
Yeah.
That's not true. We're in 1984, George Orwell's The Ministry of Truth. Who are you going to believe, me or your own lying eyes?
Correct. This is heavy stuff. It's so heavy, it's choking up again.
I know.
Get it out. Get it out. Now, the thing is, as you're talking, most people are already going to categorize this interview as an extremist, alt-right, white militia. Can you, and in chapter 11, as a matter of fact, you also bring up the fact of immigration. And so anyone that has any concerns in regards to what's going on with the immigration crisis as well, again, this book contains so much about what we're facing in such a short span of time, by the way. It's like everything blew up. My wife, before she married me, was not necessarily big into certain comic books and stuff like that. I'm not super big on that, but we did watch a series based on one of the comic books, and it's all fictitious because it's all based on all these horrific things, this secret society doing these. And right away, whenever you think about anything like that that's close to this, conspiracies, corruption in the government, abnormal things happening, explosions, blackouts, chaos, a rise in crime, that's almost unstoppable because the criminals are in charge. All this, once we hit the pandemic, I remember, again, while I was reading the book, my wife, I was sharing things with my wife, and my wife turns to me and says, and I remember her face. And I also remember telling her, keep your eyes on the road, because she was looking at me like, I can't believe this. And she was saying, it's like Gotham City is becoming a reality. It's like our society is melting apart. Now, I want to go back to chapter 11. I don't know if you have your whole book memorized, but in chapter 11, you start talking about immigration, civil liberties. But yet today, any time that someone talks about anything that's relating with immigration and civil liberties, you're called a militia extremist, and you are part of white privilege. Is that a narrative that is just to silence everyone no matter what? What do you have to add in regards to that, and that demanding of adherence to their point of view, or else you're wrong? And we're talking about our representatives not necessarily sticking to the Constitution anymore. It's just that they're telling us this is what you have to accept. That was a lot, Stone. Can you please give us some insight, or change it up, or if you want, I can simplify it a little bit more.
No, I'll try to address it. Well, the first thing is, you said that people would assume that I'm a white supremacist militia. I'm not white. I'm Hispanic. Hence Stone Seguin. But you know what? Before I'm Hispanic, I'm a Texan and I'm an American. And yes, I said that in order for a reason. But we'll skip that. So the immigration is obviously very, very complicated. But the first lens that I look at it is from economics. And I know people are going, oh, you can't look at it. These are human beings. Well, look, the United States is heavily, heavily in debt. We haven't even really talked about that. Our debt is already basically larger than our economy, which means if you were to take every dollar that our economy, produces, it would take all of that to pay off the debt. So that's one. So I don't know how we justify saying, hey, let's bring in hundreds of thousands or millions of people, even though we desperately maybe want to help them. How do we justify bringing them in and giving them all these kinds of benefits, all this kind of help, when our government itself is basically bankrupt. And by the way, as a veteran, I can tell you, what do we always hear? The VA care for the veterans is bad because there's not enough money and this and that. So again, you're telling our veterans who served this country, many of them who were grievously wounded. Now, I served in peacetime. I was blessed. I served in peacetime. I never saw combat. I wasn't wounded. But a lot of our guys, a lot of our men and women were, and we're telling them we can't spend more money to help you because we have to help foreigners. Now, I'll link that back to the Bible as well. People will say, well, what would Jesus do? Wouldn't Jesus? Yes. But in the Bible, if you look, it wasn't the government. The government was never tasked with helping the poor. It was the individual. It was the churches. It was the synagogue. The immigration issue is a big issue and it's complicated, but quite frankly, the United States cannot afford to be bringing in this many people. In the Bible, the government was never called to take care of. It was always the private citizen, the church, the individual. So I have no problem with private charities doing what they can to help these individuals. But I do not believe that we should have an open border, everybody come policy. I just think it's not sustainable. And once it fundamentally changes the nature of this country. Again, you can look this up, Barna Research, Pew Research. 75%, if not 80% of people that come to this country vote Democrat for the rest of their lives. I mean, that's easily provable. And so that easily shows why so many Democrats, in my opinion, are for as open immigration policy.
Now, Miguel, if you're okay to share.
Yes, I'm okay to share.
As a young man, Miguel's a very young man. He's in his early 20s. Your generation, this is not a criticism. It's just basically this is what it is. Again, we're gonna tell you the real deal. This is how we discuss things.
Right.
Let's not hide it. But your generation seems to be totally opposed to the message that is found in this book.
Yes.
Because they're seeing when they hear that, they're right away, their defense says, I don't need to hear that. That's a bunch of white racist, garbage.
Yes.
It's racist. It's bigoted.
It's
offending me, and it's Nazi propaganda. Now, Mr. Stone himself shared that he's a Hispanic.
Right.
What do you see, especially coming in the borderland, in regards to the ideologies of the philosophers that influenced the early founding fathers of America, but also as a Hispanic that has been blessed to be in America? What would you recommend to your generation, or even more to the Christian youth? Because right now, you would see, and you can see things clearly and candid, Mr. Stone, on social media, on almost everyone. You're talking about almost 100% of the immigrants will vote Democrat. I would dare to even spread it now that everyone from Miguel's generation and under is 100% extreme liberal.
I don't know about 100%.
I would say almost, well, not 100%,
Yeah.
you're right, but almost 100%. It's because they go to school and this is all they're hearing is you're Hispanic, or you're a minority, and or you're this and you're that. So you have to realize is the enemy is America, what America has been traditionally. Basically almost, Mr. Stone, is a constitution. What would you advise to your generation, Miguel, in regards to this, or to a minority that might be hearing this and says, I don't know about this. I'm afraid because I've always heard these are the bad guys. And we're talking about even people of faith.
Right. Okay. So to address the secular people, right? The non-believers, stop being snowflakes. And there's just no way around it. Why we became so sensitive, I'm not too sure, but it's about time it stops. Our government is not going to continue functioning when we are old enough to take over it if we continue with this ideology. Now, to the people in faith, there's a lot of false doctrines out there, and you need to be wary of what you're listening to, what you're watching, what churches you attend. It's very important, because the Bible is very clear. It's very plain, if that makes any sense. So there shouldn't be any divisive issues on simple things. So do your research, read your Bible, understand what it says, and you'll get your answers, and you'll see what the rest of us are talking about.
Mhm.
If that makes any sense.
And in regard, thank you, Miguel. In regards to race, the divisive ideology of races and the and cultures, is it real, Mr. Stone? In your book, you mentioned about Aslan, and I remember. Let me just give you a little bit of my experience when I did my undergraduate studies. Is that, and you can see the influence. We would have a class that is a specific class, and I don't know if it's just because the professor didn't want to teach, or he needed a break, but he would say, I'm going to have a special speaker next week. I don't know if he just wanted to go off golfing or what, I don't know, but he wouldn't show up, and he would have a special speaker, and the special speaker was almost unequivocally, almost always someone from the Chicano studies. Now, because I'm in the border town, I'm like, okay, that's great. That's wonderful. I want to know a little bit about it. I'm going to tell you that it was almost very anti two things. As a Hispanic and as a Christian, I had to wrestle with this, and I had to really, like Miguel said, do my own research, because almost everybody was not doing their own research. They were just swallowing whatever they're hearing and going back and say, I'm not going to go to church anymore. I'm not going to believe the word of God anymore. And America is screwed up, and America is racist. But almost unequivocally, it would hit two things. Unfortunately, it would attack the traditional Christian moral values. And I remember even other people in the class, because our professors would ask us to, do some extra readings, okay, for discussions and stuff. And as we were sitting there, I was like, what did you think about the book? Before the professor would come, because most people want to just say whatever the professor wants to hear, really, because we want to pass the class. But the real discussion was happening before class. And it was always this. I felt dirty reading the book. I felt horrible, because it was like if I was reading porn, because it was just so sexual, or it was just so anti-American, anti-Christian faith. And what do we think about it? And as I was reading the book, it's interesting, because in a lot of the special guest lectures would mention a lot about Aslan, and the dream is to one day regain that land. Now, what would be your counsel, Mr. Stone, to Hispanics whose faith and morality goes against these trends, but at the same time, they've also experienced some form of racism, and they're like in the borders, like, what do we do? What do we decide? What would your advice be? And then if you can transition more into why, without giving to being a spoiler alert, but a spoiler about the book, but what can you give us about what happens to Aslan in regards to that?
Yes. So the origin of Aslan is a bigger, obviously because we're from here, but it's a bigger concept that as this crisis develops, the 10th has to do with states' rights. And so some states will say, well, I want to break away, or I no longer want to be part of the federal government, right? And by the way, we saw this when Barack Obama was elected president. Texas and the red states made rumblings about wanting to secede. And then when Trump was elected president, then all of a sudden California, New York, and Washington State were saying they wanted to secede. So this is a long time concept in the United States. Within the states, though, there's areas that don't feel like they belong to other states, right? Again, here we know most of Texas is red, but areas like El Paso, Aslan, Austin, certain other areas are more liberal. And so that's why I chose where we come from to highlight. But there are other examples of this. There's long-time movements in Northern California to form the state of Jefferson, for instance, because that area is more rural, more conservative, and they say we have nothing in common with Sacramento and San Francisco and LA. 6 or 8 Colorado counties in the north have already voted that they want to break off and form their own state. I can go on and on. So that's where the concept comes from. And again, here it's a long time tradition of ours saying, well, do we really belong to Texas? Do we really belong to the United States at all? Because we're Hispanic, we're on the border. So I just thought that would be an interesting one to point out in context with some of these others. Now, in terms of giving advice on the racism, look, no system is perfect, but one of the things that I use this with my own children, if the United States was so racist, so horribly racist, like a lot of these liberals would have you believe, then why do so many millions of Hispanics from Mexico all the way down to South America risk their lives to come to this country? Because, and I'm not saying that there is no racism in this country, but obviously they believe that the opportunity and the freedom that we afford them far outweighs the racism that they may encounter. And by the way, that mirrors my own experience. I encountered a little bit of racism, not so much growing up here, but when I went to Maryland to school on the East Coast, I had people tell me, oh, you only got into this school because you're Hispanic. At which point I would tell them what my SAT score was and ask them what their SAT score was and see if that was really the case. So we do see some racism, but on the whole, I challenge people, say, you tell me what nation on the earth is better than ours. We have a lot of problems. I can probably list them better than most. But what nation on the earth is better than what we have right here? And again, the facts are borne out, and I've used this with my children. Why else would millions of people from Latin America and other countries risk their lives to come here if we were so terrible?
Mm-hmm. Now, in regards to Aztlan, if you can just give the audience a little bit of, they might not be familiar with what that is. Aztlan, Aztlan. What is that briefly? And then why in your book are you saying that that is going to happen in a big city like El Paso, Texas, in Texas of all places, that will now stop being part of the USA? And how can that happen when it has one of the biggest, heaviest armed cities in the entire United States with a huge military site like Fort Bliss?
Yes, well, good question. So again, El Paso has long seen itself, for many people, saying, we don't really fit with Texas. So do we belong to Texas? And so I just carried that forward logically. If Texas chooses to leave the United States, as is the scenario in this book, then I could see the city leaders in this region saying, well, we're going to break away from Texas. And by the way, again, there is historical precedence of this. We have the state of West Virginia today because those counties, after Virginia left and fought for the Confederacy, those counties that are now West Virginia said, we're not going with you. We're remaining loyal to the United States. Mm-hmm. So again, there's historical precedence of that. So I could see, yes.
No, go ahead.
So I could see our city leaders saying, well, you know what? I don't want to be part of Texas, which is, as you mentioned, following the right-wing extremist path. But we maybe don't want to get on part of New Mexico because then we would be subject to, we'd be also almost like New Mexico's stepchild. So I could see, and plus with the history, there's a long-term history, as you mentioned, Chicano studies, border studies. A lot of people say, you know what, we should be something different. We should maybe not revert to Mexico, but we should claim our own unique heritage and declare. So again, as you mentioned, I didn't come up with the idea of Aztlan. In fact, years ago in the 1980s, I read a book about a nuclear war, a limited nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And in this book, the author claimed had that El Paso separating itself along those lines as well. So that's a very well-known concept and idea, and I just thought it would be interesting. Now, to answer your question about Fort Bliss, remember that the United States is loath to use military force, and I put some of this in the book. Could Fort Bliss bring El Paso back into the fold by force? Absolutely. But what military or political commander in the United States would say, hey, Fort Bliss, go and kill El Pasoans, imprison them, do whatever you have to do to force them back in by force? Now, that obviously eventually happened in other parts of the country, as we saw in the first Civil War. But I just thought it was interesting that at the very beginning, people would be reluctant to do that. initial idea would say, well, I'm not going to go and start shooting El Pasoans, Texans, American citizens just because they voted to leave a political entity. That may come later as it's forced in the book or in the scenario of a civil war, right? But initially, the thought initially of, hey, I'm going to use military force against American civilians is abhorrent. And so that's what kind of, and that's the book ends, and we don't know what the full future of Aslan is.
And it's interesting that you're talking about that, because I remember hearing about that way back since the late 80s, early 90s, that the city of El Paso would probably be better off joining New Mexico. And there was a movement to leave. And it you know, as you and I, we've had conversations about the book in person as well. I've had a keen eye and an ear to things that are going on. And for instance, in Washington, in Oregon, in Northern California, there is people pushing, just like you mentioned about the situation with Virginia. There's people that are pushing right now, actively. I mean, we're not talking about states anymore. We're not talking about states seceding. We're talking about counties of states wanting to join the bordering states because they're saying we've had it. And we saw it last year where Portland fell under the total control of not even the US government. Not even the federal government was able to go in there, and they even renamed themselves that area, and people were applauding it. What do you have to say about that, and in light of your book as well?
Well, that's an excellent point as well. By the way, what you just mentioned in Portland was very interesting because, again, there you see the reluctance of the federal government. A lot of people were saying, why didn't Trump send in the army? Well, because a president is going to be reluctant to send in without the governor's request, without a mayor's request. Now you're basically setting up a fight between the local or the state authorities and the federal authorities. So, by the way, that just illustrated again, the scenario that I used back in Aslan, that the military is a last resort to be used against civilians. But you're absolutely right. That is why those scenarios where the government is leaning one direction or the other, and people from surrounding areas or even people from in there are saying, this government no longer represents me. This government is no longer protecting me, my life, my property, my shops, my homes. So I don't want to be affiliated with that government. And yes, these movements that you mentioned of counties wanting to separate from states, there's over 20 at last count, the last time I checked, over 20 all around the US of various parts of states wanting to leave and either form their own state or join other states.
And what's interesting about that is that you're talking about historical movements and how that it led to that. Now you keep on bringing up Obama, for instance, President Obama during that time, and when we had that. Let's go now all the way to the year 2020. Anybody, even if, and I have to be careful how I word this, because if I don't word it correctly, the video will probably, or the message or the audio message will be censored or shut down. But you're not allowed to say the word fraud in regards to the VOTE of 2020, if you know what I'm saying. Isn't that crazy that we have to now do that? We have to now do that because the algorithms are gonna, boom, red flag you and say, you're gone. Now, why am I saying that? Because it's a bad word. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're stupid, and they get real ugly. And how dare you even question it? How dare you question the results of the election? But yet we had several states. I go back to the time that my wife was driving and looking at me in disbelief. It's like we're not living in the world that we were in before, Mr. Stone. Everything has changed.
Everything.
How could all these states challenge the results of the election, but blatantly we are told that is ridiculous? You are an insurrectionist. Oh man, I hope insert, I don't know. You gotta see, look at how we are now panicking on how we talk, on how we say, on what ideas could possibly be there. Um, and so how could we have all these states and then the Supreme Court just flick them off like a booger? They flick them away. And now you see all these states feeling that I don't believe that sentiment has gone away, Mr. Stone. And now you start feeling it all over again. Going back with the issue of race and immigration, it's a big one. In regards to the border between Texas and Mexico, we are now having, the last I heard was the governor of Nebraska is sending people to help Texas defend itself. And that's the word they're using. And I always think about the book. The terminology they're using is sounding military. And they're saying, we are uniting to help Texas defend itself from foreign invasion. And other people are saying, you can't say that. That's racist. Whether you agree with it or not, the book comes to mind because a terminology is, and again, this is not a show to call people to go against the government. I'm not saying that. This is a fictional book, but the fictional book is coming to be very fast. I don't want to say it's Bible because it's not Bible, but it's shocking me, Mr. Stone. And the thing is that these states are aligning again, the same states that challenged the Supreme Court and were ignored. They're aligning with Texas to go defend the states from foreign invasion. That's what they're calling it. The last one I heard was Nebraska. Florida also jumped in. We have other states that are jumping. Now, this is where we're building momentum. All right. Can you please share in regards to the book and any new insight, maybe connecting it to your new book? Can you share with us about that?
Yes, well, it's a natural response when people and states feel that they're being persecuted or attacked or even just ignored by the federal government, that the states and the people are going to band together, correct? So a big part of the book, and in the book I have a map that shows the red states and the blue states. And the red states and the blue states have been around for, I don't know, at least 20 years. And the thing that's interesting is that as these things happen, whether it's the pandemic, the immigration, abortion, gun control, those red states and blue state divide continue. There's very little crossover. So it makes sense that the red states are more and more going to band together. And by the way, the blue states as well. For instance, the blue states are starting to band together to try to overcome the electoral college. I don't know if you've heard of that effort.
Correct.
More and more blue states are passing laws that say that they're going to award all their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. That's the blue states trying to overcome, circumvent the electoral college. So again, it's happening on both sides. The whole point of my book is the divide between the red states and the blue states. And every issue just highlights the divide more and more. So I'm not surprised that I'm seeing things like Nebraska and Florida sending their National Guard to Texas. It can be expected. And I think those kinds of things are gonna become more and more common. It's just gonna become more and more common as the blue states and the red states can no longer find common ground. And unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. I wish there was an alternative. You know, the only alternative I see would be an amicable divorce, right? If somehow the blue states and the red states say, okay, the only way to avoid fighting this out is if you guys go your way and we go our way, and there might be a few other states that want to become their own states, and I talk about that in the book. I would love for that because I think that's the only way we avoid a widespread conflict. But otherwise, it's going to be blue states wanting to go one way and red states wanting to go the other way.
Mm-hmm. And there is a lot that comes into play in regards to this crisis, the immigration crisis, Mr. Stone. And as a person of faith, I want to help these people that are seeking asylum. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of them are seeking asylum because they're facing horrendous things in their country. All right. But it's now to a level that is almost unreal. What are we going to do with this? It's almost overwhelming. I'm hearing, and the reason that they're sending so many troops in down is because there is cities that are totally, absolutely overtaken to the point that the citizens and the residents have lost control of their cities. Okay. Now, within that, despite the fact that there is people seeking asylum because of the political unrest in their country, the gangs taking over the society, there's a big concern that a lot of people are not talking about. There's a fact that's going on that's being taken advantage of the situation. Like any enemy is going to find a weak spot and it's going to come to try to go through there. And I'm talking about the extreme Islamic terrorists. We have people that are coming in along with these caravans. And it reminds me of the Marine Corps hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, in reference to the Mexican-American War of 1846. Now notice again the controversy here, due to the annexation of Texas. To the war, to the shores of Tripoli, dealing with a political situation of an economic situation as well, with the Islamic pirates over there in Northern Africa. Again, dealing with immigration, dealing with fights. Can you share from your military background, and as a Hispanic and as a person of faith, what do you see in these things that we're looking at, in light of also with the Marine Corps hymn?
Well, so the two things that you referenced there on the Marine Corps hymn, many people may not know that America's very first foreign war after the revolution, the War of Independence, was against the North African Islamic Barbary pirates. So what does that have to do with it? Am I an Islamophobe or something? No, I am not. But a lot of folks say, oh, if we just live peacefully with other people, they will not bother us. They will not attack us. Or some of the Muslim extremists don't like us because we support Israel. Well, Israel didn't exist in 1801. And yet the Islamic Barbary pirates were attacking our ships. Wow. And impressing our sailors. So the bottom line is this: whether it's Islamic or Christian or Catholic or Buddhist, there's some people in the world that are bad people. That's the reality. It doesn't matter what religion it is. It doesn't matter what. There's some people that are bad people that want to do us ill. And so we always have to be very much on guard against those people. So for today, we need to control the southern border. We need to know not just whether there's any Islamic extremists coming in, but these Hispanic traffickers, these Hispanic, drug dealers that are coming in. Is it all of them? Of course not. But if we don't know and don't control the border, how do we even know? How do we even know who the legitimate refugee asylum seekers are and who are the ones that are just trying to come and bring the drugs and human trafficking, or the Islamic State, or Chinese spies for that matter, which we've had reports of all these foreigners. The bottom line is that most countries control their border. And here's an interesting thing. Mexico, for instance, again, people, do your research. Mexico has far more stringent immigration laws than the United States. Try being caught in Mexico illegally. You're going to spend a long, long time in prison. And Mexico's prisons are not nearly as accommodating as ours. Most nations in the world have very stringent immigration controls. We already are the far most open nation in the world to immigration. And yet it's convenient for the left, for liberals, to criticize us and say that we need to do more. I do not think so. I do not think so. We need to control the borders, and we need to defend our nation first and foremost, and our people.
Now, it's interesting. We're talking about people around the world. And again, it still comes back to what are the main issues going on in society in regards to these terrorists. and also the issue dealing with Montezuma. And I want to get to more stuff though in regards to the prophetic. Still, we're going to talk about George Washington's vision. We're going to talk about William Branham's prophecy. But in chapter 22, before we get there, in chapter 22, you mentioned that Russia and North Korea or China, there's a possibility of them attacking America and taking advantage because America's going through this crisis. And then the Middle East as well gets involved in one way or the other because they take advantage of the situation that we're going through, this possible civil war, and the country splits up. So, and then you go into chapter 25, and then you mentioned in chapter 25 that the civil war that's about to erupt then turns real bloody, but it turns real bloody because it's mainly fought with civilians. And I'm going to quote you from chapter 25. And it says, possibly I can add in regards to that, it says the most bloodiest of all wars is civil wars. Now, can you tell us what do you see here in regards to the involvement of foreign countries and in regards to the bloodiest part of civil war being people against each other of the same country?
Yeah, so with the involvement of foreign countries, again, the United States, whether right or wrong, we're seen as the policeman of the world. And so we know that Russia has their own agenda. We know that Iran, North Korea, China has their own agenda. So it just seems logical to me that if we were to become involved in such a grave internal crisis, that these nations would seek maybe not to directly attack the United States, but certainly to further their own political aims. Maybe Russia attacks the Baltic states. Maybe China chooses that time to say the United States won't be able to help Taiwan, so now's the time to take back Taiwan. Maybe Iran chooses that time to launch an attack on Israel. So whenever the policeman, right, and again, we go back to what does our Lord tell us? Before an enemy can come into a home, he first must submit and tie up, bind the strong man of the house, right? So similarly, if we're bound by ourselves and we're internally distracted, many of these world players are going to try to seek advantage. So that's where I think that comes from. And again, there's historical precedent for that. By the way, people celebrate the battle of Cinco de Mayo, the Battle of Puebla, but people don't realize what caused that. Well, during the American Civil War, France decided, hey, the Americans are distracted. They're not going to enforce the Monroe Doctrine, and they came in and set up a puppet king in Mexico,
Wow.
which eventually led to the Mexicans having to throw out the French. So again, there's precedent for all of this,
and it's probably going to cause a ripple effect in other countries too. Real fast, though, because we want to get to other things, but real fast, it doesn't go with the flow of the interview. But if you can tell me why in the book do you put North Korea and Japan supporting the free states?
So the free states are basically the ones that are conservative, right? So Japan, I think, sees that Japan's primary threat is China. China and Japan are age-old, centuries-old enemies, right? And so I think Japan would see that they're better off with the conservative states that are going to stand up to China rather than go along with China, play nice with them. And the North Korean was an interesting twist. I thought it was just a matter of saying, hey, anything that causes division, that causes disruption on the United States is beneficial to us. So for two different reasons, I thought, North Korea might actually initially, not that they would actually eventually want the free states to succeed, but hey, anything that causes discord, anything that causes chaos within America is going to be beneficial to these rogue, military dictatorships. So for two totally different reasons, on Japan and North Korea, they both support the free states.
Thank you so much. Now, let's get into some very interesting things in regards to now the supernatural. A lot of people don't realize that George Washington, according to him, experienced a vision, a supernatural vision. And this happened uh, when he was in the middle or about to lose the Valley Forge battle, which, if you study history, it's probably the battle that if the those who were calling for the rebellion and independence, if they would have lost this battle, we would probably still be under the English or the British flag. Okay, we would not have won. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, but the thing is that it was a very close battle. They were losing. It was a harsh winter. The expressions during that time is it was a very harsh winter, and other people criticize and say it was a winter like no other. But because it was during war, uh, food was limited. The farmers, again, look at the similarities of what was going on. Food resources were limited. Okay, and farmers were smuggling food to the enemy, the British powers. They were smuggling food to them instead of allowing the people from the American land to be able to eat. This battle, the battle of Valley Forge, um, was horrible. Okay, the soldiers were just barely making it and trying to stay alive. And they felt this is it. The revolution's gonna die here. Washington, our very first president, George Washington. Okay, yes, okay, George Washington. He went to the Lord in prayer, and he begged God for intervention here. And Washington himself, okay, by the way, went to his tent, and he claims he got a vision from God. Other people say no, he didn't get a vision from God. We won't go into the details and the criticisms whether yes or no, but Washington claims he got a vision from God, and an angel spoke to him, and he then saw the vision. In that vision was three things that America was going to go through. By the way, if you want to look up this vision word for word, because I'm going to quote quite a bit of it. And you know, Mr. Stone, I struggled when I was preparing this, but at the same time, you know, and I was talking to Miguel as I was preparing this, and I said, I don't even know if I should quote it all. Do you remember that? I don't know if I should quote it all because some people are gonna consider it racist, some people are gonna consider it this, but the thing is, that's what I promise people is we're gonna just tell it to you the way it is. It's just a primary a resource. I can't change it. I didn't write it. I didn't give him the vision. All right. So, but according to George Washington, he has this vision, and you can find it in its entirety because it's recorded in the Library of Congress, by the way. So a lot of people discount it and they say it's bogus. It wasn't real. Look for it for yourself in the Library of Congress. It's there. But according to Washington's testimony, he says that it was revealed to him in this vision that three major catastrophes will come to America in the future. Now, one of our very first messages, we interviewed Prophet Charlene Ramirez, who wrote a book that I'm going to quote from you very soon. And she also mentioned this vision that George Washington had. Now, he believes that there's three things, Mr. Stone, that America is going to go through. Okay, and he says, according to him, this is one thing that the angel told him: as long as the stars of heaven stand, the republic will stand. So the thing is, it's not, you know, if you're thinking that we're calling for America to end, we're not calling for America to end. Don't kill me from their platform. We're not calling for America to end. But what we're saying is that America, it seems like it's going to go through a hard time. Mr. Stone talks about it, possibly from a fictional a book, but yet it's eerily coming to pass that we're going to go through a very hard time. And so this angel gives this vision to George Washington, and he says that it's going to go through three tragedies. The first one, obviously, was the Revolution War, okay, the Independence War. The second, he talks specifically, Mr. Stone, that America will go through a civil war. Mind you, way ahead before it happens, America actually goes through a civil war. But the third peril, he says, and I quote, that it troubled him so much because it was going to be the darkest peril, and it was coming with a dark red light, and it troubled him greatly. What is this third tragedy? And why was it a red light? Could it be the communist, socialist, anarchists, which, by the way, they seem to gravitate to the color red? Could it be that the communists, the socialists, or the anarchists are going to cause this third peril in America? Now, remind you, this is one of the founding fathers, and he experienced this, okay? But he says that the first peril, again, like I said, is going to be basically the war for independence. The second peril, it was going to be the Civil War. But the third peril that was coming was a second Civil War. And this is part, and I'm going to quote it to you. And Mr. Stone, please feel free to comment as I'm sharing this. Our country, now, by the way, he's saying this before America becomes a country, but he says, our country was enveloped in this volume of cloud, and I saw these vast armies devastate the whole country and burn the villages, towns, and cities. And it sends me shivers, Mr. Stone, because one of the things that's the self-destruction of our country is what? The looting, the burning down of our cities. But let's go on with what he says. A dark, shadowy angel placed his trumpet once more in his mouth and blew a long, fearful blast. Instantly, a light of 1,000 suns shone down from above, and an angel upon whose head still shone the word union descended from the heavens and attended the legions of white spirits. Joined the inhabitants of America, closed up their broken ranks, and renewed the battle. Then the bright angel cried with a loud voice, while the stars remain and the heavens ascend down dew upon the earth, the long shall the union last, taking from the brow the crown from which the blazon of the word. That's a little wordy. I'm just quoting it, okay? The union, by the way, he placed it upon the standard while the people kneeling down said, Amen. Now, as the scene faded, the mysterious visitor, the sun said, the son of the republic, 3 great perils will come upon the republic. The most fearful is the third, but this greatest conflict, the whole world united shall not prevail against her. Now, Mr. Stone, by the way, this is what I'm talking about, the infiltration from the War of Montezuma, the wars of Tripoli, cyber attacks coming from the outside of the United States, the influence of ideologies that are not American and go against what the framers of the Constitution put together. But notice how, according to the vision given to Washington, if it is real, is that it is entities from outside of the country that are going to try to prevail against America. They're going to wreak havoc, but they will not be able to prevail against the republic. And it says, let every child of the republic learn to live for his God, his land, and the union. Wow. I'll mention more. Some say that Washington mentions that the angel opened the spiritual eyes of the specter from Africa, because he goes on to talk about the shadowy specter, by the way, a ghostly, demonic figure coming from Africa. But again, let me quote it in his own words. And this time, the dark, shadowy angel turned his face southward. And from Africa, I saw an ill-omened specter approach our land. It fitted slowly over every town and city of the latter. The inhabitants presently set themselves in battle against each other. Whew. Okay. As I continued looking, I saw a bright angel on whose brow rested a crown of light, on which was traced the word union, bearing the American flag, which he placed between the divided nation. He said, remember, ye brethren, instantly the inhabitants, casting down their weapons, became friends once more and united around the national standard. I cast my eyes upon America and beheld villages and towns and cities string up one after another until the whole land of the Atlantic to the Pacific By the way, this is before America became a nation, Mr. Stone, and he's already seen that America reached from the Atlantic to the Pacific, which is pretty amazing. Now he says, which place between the divided nation, okay? So this is what he shows us, okay? He's showing us. So he was from the Atlantic to the Pacific, was dotted with them again. I heard a mysterious voice say, Son of the Republic, the end of the century cometh. Look and learn. And this time the dark shadowy angel turned his face southward from. This was available for you to look more into, okay? So now I want to deal with the specter from Africa that comes to America and what Washington saw. And it says, the ill-omened specter approached her land from Africa. Now, in parentheses, this is not Washington, this is me. Mr. Stone, the first thing that comes to me is the Islamic extremists, okay? And it fitted so slowly over now this is Washington again, it fitted slowly over every town and every city of the ladder, okay? So as we go on, the shadowy specters going from town to town, and the inhabitants set themselves in battle against each other. Washington then mentions that the angel finished the vision saying, these great perils will come upon the republic. The most fearful is the third, but it is the greatest conflict. The whole world united shall not prevail against her. Let every child of the republic learn to live for his God, his land, the union. With these words, the vision vanished. And I started as I read this, I was thinking, the destiny of the United States was preordained almost by God. We see the purpose of the United States come and it made such an impact in the whole world. But yet here our first president, he didn't know he was going to be our first president yet at this time, gets such a strong visitation in a dire time of need. And he also says the following in regards to the heavenly interventions. Instantly, a light of 1,000 suns shone around from above me and pierced and broke into fragments the dark cloud which enveloped America. At the same moment, the angel upon whose head still shone the word Union and who bore our national flag in one hand and a sword in the other descended from the heavens, attended by legions of white spirits. These immediately joined inhabitants of America, who I perceive will well nigh overcome, but who immediately taking courage again, closed up their broken ranks and renewed the battle. Again, amid the fearful noise of the conflict, I heard the mysterious voice saying, Son of the Republic, look and learn. The voice ceased, and the shadowy angel for the last time dipped water from the ocean and sprinkled it upon America. Instantly, the dark cloud rolled back, together with the armies it had brought, leaving the inhabitants of the land victorious. Then once more, I beheld the villages, towns, and cities springing up where I had seen them before, while the bright angel planting the assured standard had brought in the midst of them and cried with a loud voice, while the stars remain and the heavens send down the dew upon the earth, so long shall the union last. And taking from his brow the crown on which blazing word union, he placed it upon the standard, while the people kneeling down and said, Amen. Now, here's the conclusion, what it says. The conclusion, 3 perils will come upon the republic. The most fearful for her is the third, but the whole world united shall not prevail against her. Let every child of the republic learn to live for his God, his land, and the union. With these words, the vision vanished, and I started from my seat and felt that I had seen a vision wherein had been shown me the birth, the progress, and the destiny of the United States. Wow. Mr. Stone, this is a little wordy. It's not in common modern English as we use it. Can you give us any insight in regards to Washington's words, visions? And Miguel, feel free to jump in. And it relates to what went on in the 10th, the book that you wrote.
Yes, I mean, without this is purely speculation. Um, the African peril could be a number of things, or maybe a couple of things. As you mentioned, definitely there's Islamic extremists that can be found in northern Africa. It could also be that the Black Lives Matter movement which has already caused a lot of divisiveness. Way again, do your own research. Both founders of Black Lives Matter, they're both ladies. They're both about um, witches. They're into the supernatural. So it could be that. Um, we're told, that the devil is the principle of chaos and disorder. So certainly we saw Black Lives Matter causing a lot of disorder in a lot of the country this past summer. So that could be one, or the Islamic extremism could be another. In terms of the foreign armies, it could be the United Nations. And by the way, the United Nations has lately taken to using a lot of African soldiers in their international peacekeeping. Obviously, they get soldiers from lots of different places, but it seems like more and more often they're using soldiers from Africa and other third world countries for a number of different reasons. Not nearly as often Americans or NATO or things like that. So it could be any one of those. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about also the foreign armies. Uh, that's a scenario which a little bit of a spoiler alert. Uh, if I finish the second book, that might come up because it has occurred to me that if you had a scenario where the blue states and the red states were fighting, a dirty little secret is that the majority of the military is based in the red states. I mean, that's just facts. Look it up. For a number of reasons, blue states don't seem to like military bases, so they've been closing them over the years. And I could see a scenario where if the blue states, the liberals, are losing, they could ask for international help. And we all know
Wow.
who does the international community like? The international community always likes the Democrat presidents and they hate the Republicans. You can see that all the way back to Ronald Reagan. They loved every Democrat president, but every Republican is a cowboy and is a threat to world peace. So I could see, liberals calling on the United Nations or even NATO and saying, hey, send us help so that we preserve, quote unquote, the real United States and don't let it be taken over by these, redneck hicks, whatever. And no, I could see that. And you could see that in the international community. They much prefer dealing with liberals than conservatives. Now, in terms of who would triumph in that, I'll give you two quotes. So even if we were to be invaded by foreign armies, in the natural, I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet, but in the natural, everybody that really studies history knows it would be very difficult to defeat us from a foreign army. Abraham Lincoln once said, all the armies of Europe, with Napoleon Bonaparte as their leader, could not by force take a drink from the Mississippi. Okay? Think about that. And then later, Admiral Yamamoto from Japan, when there was talk that they wanted to invade the United States after Pearl Harbor, he said, because he had been here, he had studied in the United States at Harvard, he had crossed the United States by rail in the 20s. And he told the Japanese military establishment, you cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. And I think that still applies. So I don't know. I didn't know about the George Washington vision when I wrote the book, but somebody told me about it shortly after I wrote the book. But I certainly think that nothing that I wrote goes contrary to what could happen in that vision.
Thank you so much. Now, I want to add a little bit in regards to maybe expanding a little bit of George Washington's vision. And now with the prophecies of a gentleman of William Branham. William Branham was an American evangelist, but he was used greatly in the word of knowledge. As a matter of fact, he's one of the figures that I teach at a Bible college. And one of the classes that I love to teach is a history of the charismatic renewal or the movement of revival from the New Testament all the way to modern times. And William Branham was an evangelist that was used powerfully under the power of the prophetic word, the word of knowledge. Okay. if you can, again, like Mr. Stone mentions, do your own research. He is a man that was used in such a powerful manner, powerfully from the word of God. And yet he was also a very simple man, but it spoke very calmly and very, very just kept it, calm, quiet. But, God used them mightily. William Branham has his controversies, all right? His theology wasn't always the best, but I've always told people a little parenthesis in regards to the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Just because you're used in the gift doesn't mean that you should be a pastor. A pastor should be able to have the knowledge, the full counsel of God's word, and be able to teach from the whole counsel. I always call the pastor is kind of like your primary care physician, your family doctor. He should be able to teach you from everything and feed you everything from Genesis to Revelation. But we do have some people that God uses in certain gifts, and just because they say things or are used in a certain way, especially when it comes to the music industry, all of a sudden everyone wants to hear what they have to teach, and they don't know what they're talking about, but God is using them. That's fine, but that doesn't mean they have everything down. In regards to William Branham, he was a simple man, but God used him strongly in the word of knowledge and in healing of the sick, uncompromised in front of hundreds and sometimes thousands of people. There's still people today that know of him and experience his ministry. Several times there was angelic apparitions during his ministry. He would say that a healing angel joined them when he would start ministering. He would have sudden visions. And I know some people, and it seems to be a characteristic of people that are used in this manner, where you can be in a simple conversation and all of a sudden they're looking somewhere else, like, I just saw this and I just saw that. And you're like, wow, that's very interesting. But that's how God uses them. And that's how William Branham was. Well, William Branham also is known, while there was an apparition of a halo that would appear over his head. And so this is just a type of fellow we're talking about. Now, I was speaking with Miguel a couple of days ago, and I said, wow, this is going to be intense, but we got to share this. We got to share this. Miguel, you have a little bit of exposure with a group in regards to the prophetic. What do you feel, though, before we go into this? Now, we're talking about Mr. Stone's military expertise, his ideas. We also looked into George Washington's insight, or not insight, just his testimony of a vision. You also have been able to witness other people that flow in the prophetic gifts. Do you feel that this is something that we should pay attention to and mix with the area of what's going on with modern society?
Yes, definitely, for sure.
Why is that?
Well, Jesus sent them 2 by 2. One was a prophet and one would interpret. So always when giving a message of a prophetic message, you're looking out for your confirmations. And it's good to have an extra confirmation, but I mean, we're at the point that we have more than one, more than two. We have, we have I forgot his name. I'm so sorry.
You're talking about the prophet? William Branham.
We have William Branham. Yes, him. He stated that, and then we have George Washington's vision, right? So all of that is brewing to the reality, which is if that makes sense.
And as we go on, Mr. Stone, it's interesting that before we hit the pandemic, and then once we hit the pandemic, prophets started to prophesy a lot of what was going on. And if anything, there's been an attack on prophets and say, you don't know what you're saying. But even after the election, they're still standing by what they're saying. They're like, no, this is what I heard from God, and I'm sticking through it. Now, time will show how what they prophesied is true or not. But let's go back to 1933. William Branham, got a vision from the Lord. And I can tell you, this is just the way God used them, in regards to the healing revivals, the words of knowledge. But as he prepared for a service, he went to his car just to get himself together, think about the sermon, organize, just go over the points for his sermon. And boom, he went into a trance. As he went into the trance, he saw a vision. Okay. And when he came out of it, he quickly wrote it on a piece of paper and said, I was shown the end times. Now, this is what he wrote. He saw, and again, like Washington has 3 points. He saw 3 things, Mr. Stone. He said that there was going to be 3 isms that they were to come: fascism, Nazism, and then he let kind of like, again, George Washington kind of leaves a third kind of vague. And William Branham leaves the third one, the third ism, kind of vague. Fascism came, Nazism came. What is the third ism? And some people believe that it's going to be globalism. Now, some people say, well, if Washington truly got it together and it was a true vision, why didn't he give details about the Third Civil War? If William Branham was a true prophet, why didn't he give details? Because it's not him that's getting the information. It's God giving it to William Branham. And remember that the Bible also says that prophets prophesy in part. They don't necessarily have to understand everything of what they're seeing. And it reminds me of the end times. Even in scripture, we have prophets, we have people that see visions, and they see things like flying grasshoppers or scorpions. And when we think about it, like, oh man, these guys just were eating mushrooms or something, and they're watching some crazy stuff, or they had too much wine. But in reality, now we see, because it specifically talks in the Bible how they throw and they shoot fire. Okay. And so now we know we have modern technology that fits that description, and it's called a military helicopter that shoots fire. All right. So they were just trying to describe what they're watching. Doesn't mean that they had to fully understand everything. So here we have William Branham that says, I saw these 3 things: fascism, Nazism, and the third one is vague. And some people feel, Mr. Stone, that it's globalism. William Branham also prophesied about President Roosevelt to the T, and it came to pass. He prophesied about Nazi Germany and Hitler to the T. It came to pass. All those details, all those prophecies came to pass. And this was also way before the Second World War came to be. All right. He prophesied that details about Italy invading Northern Africa, the rise of Mussolini. This is everything that God was revealing to this guy back in the 1930s and 40s before it happens. He mentions, by the way, just to add a little bit about the because you're like, this was after the fact. No, it was. He mentions about how cars were going to kind of be shaped as eggs. They kind of had the more of the oval shape of the cars, the future cars, and they were not going to be operated by a steering wheel. They were going to be automated. Tesla.
Yep.
And he saw the family inside the cars playing games and interacting with each other. Maybe he missed it there because nowadays everyone's on the cell phone. All right. But the thing is that he saw the details of this. Okay. And it's amazing how God used them. And you see that all these prophecies, all these visions have come to be. But this is what he said in regards to what I'm about to discuss. And if you can, Mr. Stone, put it together with your book and modern politics. This is what he says. And I'm going to quote it to you. I'm not going to interpret it. I'm just going to quote it to you. This is not to call that pick up your arms and tear down America, or pick up and get rid of the president, or this is not what it is. I'm just quoting what he mentions and testifies God gave them. William Branham, ready? Hear this, brother. And remember, thus saith the Lord, William Branham speaking, there will be a woman rule before the end time. Now, this is his grammar, not mine, all right? There will be a woman rule before the end time. She will either be president or vice president. Or it'll be the Catholic Church I've seen her, a great woman. The nation bowed to her. It'll be one before the end times. Thus saith the Lord. Now, I want to add this as well. Okay. And by the way, I think these are out of order. If you can just make sure the order is correct. But this is what he says. Now, let's look at it a little bit closer. Okay. Throughout the 1940s and up, okay, this is what God gave them. He goes and he says, God gave me this vision again. Now, this is William Branham speaking. I saw a great woman stand up, beautifully looking, dressed in real highly royal like purple. Branham added that this woman would come to power as vice president or president or be part of the Roman Catholic Church and bring a great decay to the country in regards to morality. This is where we're going to get controversial, Mr. Stone. I'll let you try to be controversial before I can. Go ahead. What do you get from the book? What do you get about modern current events? What are we facing here in regards to the fight, the uneasiness among the states, the federal government? What are we looking at here?
Well, I mean, I think everybody knows that Kamala Harris is a divisive figure. Folks on the left love her. Folks on the right are not so crazy about her. Those of us that are conservative or Christian believe that she has some very radical left-wing views. We also know that President Biden is not cognitively able anymore, and he's in decline. A lot of people question whether even now who's really in control. Even some of the mainstream media is starting to question that. So it could be
one of the things that concerns me is he always says, I'm going to get in trouble. Or I was given a list of what to say or who to talk to. This is a guy, the leader of the whole world, saying, I'm going to get in trouble, and I was given a list of who to talk to. But go on.
Or I've said too much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's very worrisome to hear that.
If you're the boss, you don't need to worry about saying too much. You say what you think, right? Did we ever hear Trump say, oh, no, I've said too much? No. But Biden seems to say that on a daily basis. So, yeah, I definitely think that again, because of Kamala Harris's policies, it could definitely lead to some of the moral decay. She's a big believer in abortion. She's very much anti-gun. She's very much open borders, even though now she's gone back. But you can go back and find her clip saying everybody welcome, everybody's come. So I could see that, and then the parallel with the Catholic. Now Harris is not a Catholic. She grew up attending a Baptist church and a Hindu temple. But Biden is a Catholic. At least he claims to be very Catholic. So there could be some overlap there between, whether it's the woman and the Catholicism, right? Because Biden is Catholic and claims to be very Catholic. So I definitely think that the Biden-Harris team could be the ones that are, in charge when things start coming apart. But again, it's hard to know the actual timing. A lot of folks didn't think that Barack Obama was going to make it out without having some serious internal issues, and he did. So, maybe God gave us a reprieve. God certainly gave Israel and Judah reprieves, even though they continued sinning. So who knows? But it could be possible. It definitely and the pandemic and everything that's happened with the pandemic, even the military now trying to talk about UFOs. It just seems like there's so many things. I'm starting to hear different pastors and Bible teachers talk about convergence, right? There's so many prophetic things that are happening, so many conditions and things that are seemingly to come together that we could be in the time of convergence. So I could definitely see how Branham's prophecy concerning the woman in purple and the Catholic Church, that certainly could be where we're headed very soon.
And the only reason that some people are making this connection is because he specifically says vice president or president. And then he talks about her being very good looking. Well, I mean, poor guy, he was a simple man. It's like to his taste, she's good looking. But I won't get into that one. But the thing is, he finds her good looking. She's appealing to the eye.
And she wears purple.
And she wears purple, and down to the T that she would be wearing purple. Now, I've always said this about prophecies. Time will tell. Time will tell if it is. And I've always taught this, the thing is when you look at World War II and you see the way Hitler was and what he was into and what he did and how he attacked the Jewish people, it could have been that could have been the rise of the Antichrist. It could have. It could have also been with Adolf Hitler. My goodness, it could have been with Alexander the Great too. If you really want to go that back, each one of them has some aspects of the Antichrist. So I don't want to say that now is that this prophecy is fulfilled now. But what I am saying is that they are very close aligned between George Washington and William Branham's prophecy.
Right.
In the sense that they're talking about 3 stages, and that they're talking about, and like you said, President Joe Biden may not be, he claims to be a devout Catholic, but he's certainly very against and supports everything that the Roman Catholic Church stands for. And I think, again, it's because he's really not in control. Someone else is controlling him. And let's be a little bit controversial. Not because we're trying to. Right. We're just looking at the vision and the prophecy and putting it together. The shadowy specter comes from Africa. Kamala Harris, if she is the person there that William Branham is talking about, is half Asian, Haitian, not Asian, half Haitian from Haiti, and the Haitians come from Africa. And it's interesting because they are a result also of a revolution.
Yes.
And it's just way too much connection with everything. We're seeing too many connections, Mr. Stone, in regards to what is going on today. And, as I was preparing for this interview with you, I would just find myself being overtaken by the Holy Spirit, just praying in the Spirit a lot, like I've never been before. And yet, look at the topic. It has nothing to do with the power of the Holy Spirit, the typical heebie-jeebies, praise the Lord, I'm rolling on the floor kind of a message. But the power of God just kept on coming upon me so much, and praying in the Spirit and praying for our nation, down to the point that I was begging God on my way over here before the interview, and I was begging him, I was like, Lord, help me contain myself, because it's going to look horrible that I just start speaking in tongues and I can't stop. But the thing is, God is the spirit of self-control. But that was my prayer, Mr. Stone, because the presence of God was on me so hard in regards to this interview. And I think, Miguel, part of that is because the number one people who are being attacked during this time frame in regards to will America come to an end are the prophetic voices. The prophets of God. And Amos chapter 3, verse 7, this is from the New International Version, says the following: surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. Right. And it's interesting how people discount George Washington's vision. And it's much more when you start looking up William Branham, how much more people are going to align him to the KKK, to white racists. He's an ignorant. Now, you already heard me trying to quote him. It's hard to quote him because his grammar was not that great, okay? And so people are like, he's an ignorant. Well, that ignorant man prophesied so many things that came to be. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. And so, but people will attack their credibility and try to take that credibility away, Mr. Stone. They might even try to take away your credibility or mine because of the obvious things that we're seeing, but no one else cares to talk about it. Right. And my heart grieves because the Church of Jesus Christ goes to one extreme or the other. They go to being super militant and they tie everything to politics, and that's what they're all about, or they totally ignore it. And it really brings sadness to my heart to see that. And I keep on praying that we find that balance, but we cannot ignore the prophetic voices that God has used in regards to that. What, if you can please share what is in your heart, Mr. Stone, to the audience, to Christians, to people of faith, looking at William Branham's prophecies of the rise, and it's going to bring moral decay. It's going to bring a lot of division upon America. Washington's vision. You already went into detail. Can you kind of mesh them up in regards to your book, the 10th, and your sequel? And what do you feel? I know that you're not necessarily a minister, but like you said, this all came to you, and I believe that God reached out to you. What do you believe? What can you put together from all these things?
So the first thing I would say is that unfortunately, it seems that we are following in the pattern of ancient Israel and Judah. And we should not think ourselves better than they are, right? They had the very presence of God and things that we haven't seen, even though we have the Holy Spirit. And yet the majority of the nations, both of them at different times, fell away from the worship of the true God and had to face judgment. And so I would say it saddens me as well. I think that we're facing a time where the church is the remnant. Now, what does the remnant mean? I don't know. I don't know if it's 10%, 20%, but I do know that a remnant is less than the majority. And I would say that if we look around, Christians, even those that call themselves Christians in name only, are less than half of this nation now. And the ones that are truly trying to follow the Lord are even less than that. So I think we've entered the time that Israel entered in, where we have a remnant church. Obviously, we're to continue fighting the good fight and trying to spread Jesus and win converts to the Lord. But we should know that in the natural, we're probably in a losing contest, but we have to finish the race as Paul told us. The other bigger thing is, I think God has put in a pattern where societies, and not only just his societies like Israel and the United States, but societies, Rome, all these secular societies, they go through a cycle, which is very easy. I know people dispute it, but I don't understand how when it's so evident when you look at history. Societies go from bondage to prosperity. Bondage to independence, freedom, freedom to prosperity, prosperity to decadence, and decadence back into bondage. You see that pattern over and over again. The Romans, the ancient Greeks, ancient Israel, and now I think the United States is clearly in the part where we're in decline and possibly heading back to some sort of bondage. And it could be spiritual bondage. I think more than half of our nation is already in spiritual bondage and blinded, as our bishop talks about, blinded to the truth of God. So I think it's a sad time, but I think we as Christians need to rejoice that at the end we win, whatever that looks like. We don't know how closely it'll look like Washington's vision or Branham's, but we know that from the book of Revelation, we win, Jesus wins, and we win with him. And we should just try to keep the faith and keep walking strong and keep being bold. I think that this is a time when we must be bold. Jeremiah was not popular in his time. Most of the prophets were not popular in their time.
No.
But we should be bold at this time. And by the way, I do think, again, on a remnant basis, not the majority, but I do think it's happening. Initially, everybody followed along with what the government said, but I think more and more people, and again, I don't think it's going to be half or the majority, but more and more people are waking up and saying, you know what? No, the government is not lying, is lying to us. They're not telling us the truth. They have some other agenda. I don't know exactly what it is. It could be globalism, socialism, but they have some other agenda. And I think more and more people are starting to wake up, but we're seeing that many Christians are not.
Okay, I want to thank you so much. I want to. I'm glad with how you're concluding this. Like I said, I wanted to bring up our very first interview in our program was with prophetess Charlene Ramirez. She wrote this book. God is Speaking Now, and let me even see the publisher. The year it was published in 1994. And but she in the book she writes a prophecy that God gave her and a vision that God gave her, and it is in February the 20th, 1987. And this is what she titled it: A Time of Mourning for the United States. And I'm gonna just read. I'm not gonna read to you the whole book or a whole chapter or several pages. It's just one page. Hang in there. When I awoke this morning, I saw the map of the United States, and upon it, a black flag flying on a pole. I saw a woman dressed in black, weeping and crying Many seemed to be angry with God for what was happening. Now, it's awesome what you said, brother. This is an interview. I have not read this book to you before, but I want you to see. I have a feeling that God is preparing you to be a prophet, brother. But check this out, all right? This is what God speaks to her. Your pride deafened your spiritual ears. I warned you again and again, but you would not hear. So has this destruction come upon you. Be angry with yourselves, for I called to you, but it was you who chose not to listen. Awake, for these things shall come to pass. Yet before they happen, I am telling you, this is a warning to you. Open your ears and hear. Seek me while there is yet time. I am calling to you, through many of you will not hear or believe. You trust in the security of your nation and not in me. Your pride will not allow you to believe that you can fall. Only he who is anchored in me is safe. I am the one who sets nations and tumbles them. It is not the nation that is safe. It is only he who abides in me that is safe. These things I tell you before they come to pass, to give you an opportunity to repent and seek me, for I am a just God. In that day, you will be without excuse, for I have not left you without a warning from all over your land. I have risen up prophets to warn you. Now, notice this is ahead of time. This is 1987. I have sent prophets to warn you, yet you will not hear. But those who will listen and come in and abide in the rock, Jesus, Christ Jesus, they shall be kept safe in the storm, for they are anchored in me. Even as it was in Egypt, then the death angel. This is interesting because he brings in the death angel, and Washington saw angels in regards to this whole thing. But in Egypt, when the death angel passed over, and only those who had come inside and covered themselves with the blood of the Lamb were saved, so shall it be in these days as well. The word of the Lord. This is what the Lord gave to her in this book. God is speaking now, and this is volume 1 by Charlene Ramirez. And it gets me to this other scripture from Second Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. And again, think about it, how Washington's vision talks about the heavens and what's coming from the heavens. But I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin. Look at the last word, and will heal their land. This is not a call to end America. This is a warning. What we're doing, we're getting a look at all these things, a view of something that, like, many people, and by the way, the reviews I read to you are not by acclaimed critics of books. They're average people like you and I, and they are all saying basically the same thing. It's scary to read because it's becoming so real. We're looking at prophets like William Branham. We're looking at our first president of the United States. We're looking at modern prophets. Now, this was back in 1987. There's more that are out there speaking about what's to come. But just like there's warnings, there's also a prophetic word that God's Spirit is going to move mightily and powerful. Mr. Stone, thank you for joining us. I would like to ask you, Mr. Stone, would you lead us in prayer and our audience in prayer in behalf of our nation, for there to be a wake-up call, and maybe God can spare us and postpone these things, not in our generation, but in generations later, but for now, that our generation turns around. Because in one way or the other, what's cool about it is that these visions, these words, they say it might be a sign of the time of the end, but yet God still gives us an opportunity to be blessed and remain united. So will America end? Maybe not like we think it will. Maybe it will have to split, but it will come back together again if we honor Christ. Mr. Stone, could you give us any last words? Our program is Counsel and Remedy. What would you counsel everyone? Now, we have audience not just here in the United States, we have audiences everywhere. What would be your counsel in regards to this topic specifically for America, the church, and just in life? And then lead us in prayer.
So I'll start with the counsel. I would ask everyone to first and foremost get right with your walk with Jesus. If you get the spiritual right, everything else will be taken care of. We need to get our walk, myself included, right with Jesus and improve it every day. After that, we need to take practical steps. You need to get food. Start small, 3 days, make it then a week, then a month's worth of food. If you can get up to 6 months or a year's worth of food, do that. Make sure you have water, and make sure you have a means to defend your family and your food and water. Of course, we shelter under God's wing, but we have to do as much as we can to make sure that we're prepared as well. So that's what I would say. Get yourself ready spiritually, and then get yourself ready physically for whatever may come. And that's what I would say in terms of counsel. And with that, Pastor Sam, you want me to lead us in prayer?
Yes, and I think your dog wants you to also remind everyone to get dogs in their front and backyard. We can hear your dog.
That's right, and he's keeping us safe. Actually, I have several dogs. So,
but if anyone out there has a dachshund, my wife wants a dachshund or a basset hound. But anyway, in the parentheses, let her pause. All right, no cats. All right, no cats. All right, go on and lead us in prayer, brother.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day that you have given us. We rejoice and are glad in it, Father. We thank you for this opportunity to come together in fellowship and share ideas and maybe share revelation. Father, we do repent on behalf of our nation for all the things that we have failed to do and things that we have done that have led us personally and as a nation away from you, Father.
Yes, Lord.
We do ask that you would help us to turn from our wicked ways, that we repent and that we seek you in prayer and that we seek your face in all that we do, Father, that you may heal our land. We pray for wisdom and guidance for ourselves, for our political leaders, for our law enforcement, for our pastors and our bishops, that you grant them wisdom to lead us in this time. But more than anything, we just ask that you would help us all to follow you, to seek you, and that there may be revival in this country and around the world, and that we would prepare our hearts for you and for whatever you have for us, Lord. All these things we ask and receive in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Stone Seguin, author of the 10th America's Next Constitutional Crisis, Can the United States Survive? I pray that you can leave us your comments or maybe further questions for Mr. Stone Seguin and give us that thumbs up. Share this message with as many as you can. And remember to continue to join us here so that together we will supernaturally continue to walk on water. Be blessed, and we'll see you next time.